Hello everybody, welcome back to another video. I'm hoping you guys are all having a fantastic day. So as you can tell by the title, we will be talking about a savage winter storm that is pretty much imminent. It still hasn't formed, but it's going to form really quickly. It's a very unique one, and within 24 to 48 hours, this thing's going to reach its maximum and bring heavy snow, in some areas some pretty heavy rain, and the biggest part of this is a brutal cold air for this time of the year, relatively speaking. Obviously, it's not going to be January type cold, but for October, very, very cold weather as far as deep into the southern United States. Now, I'm calling this a savage winter storm because of the characteristics that the system will carry with it. Mainly being extremely fierce winds that are going to cause large amounts of potentially lake effect to occur, and obviously just the inordinate amount of cold that it's going to bring. So that's why I gave it kind of that term. Again, the main impacts from this system will probably be felt through the temperatures and wind, not necessarily the precipitation. However, there will be some areas that pick up north over 2 feet of snow. So yes, it still is impressive in that context as well. First off, I want to just show you the radar. Notice we do have, sorry about that, we do have a area of kind of showers, little areas of snow showers, and just some more consistent rain and snow. And this is going to continue to expand in coverage and spread further south. So do note we already have some pretty impressive plumes of lake effect coming off of Lake Superior. Obviously, here indicated by that blue, we can assume there's colder air. Here it's still not as cold. This low pressure is going to be forming right here, and we can't really see it yet, but we have a high pressure coming in from from the prairies of Canada, and these two things, like I explained it yesterday, are kind of like magnets that are just pushing into each other of opposite ends, and you know, the closer you push them together, the more resistant kind of they will become to each other, and the more I guess if you've ever tried putting two magnets to you know, two strong ones next to each other that don't attract, it's really hard to, you know, keep them there. You know, forcefully connect them, and this is what's going to happen. These two kind of create a very strong alley of winds, and that's going to create a lot of heavy lake effect and potentially even some heavy rain and thunder off the lakes, as the winds are going to be cold, the lakes are very warm. The setup literally couldn't be more perfect for heavy snow across especially areas like the UP. National Weather Service Weather Ready Nation map. Do note we do have an extensive area of freezes because of the cold air that the system will bring across much of the central southern United States. I do want to note that probably tomorrow and into especially the day after that, there will be freezes and frost issued, you know, the warnings and advisories issued even further south. As let's click on central Alabama. I just want to show you they're not going to be seeing the cold today yet, but in just a few days, you know, even southern Alabama, you click on just their southwest of Troy, you will have temperatures that are going to be pretty much, you know, 32. That's going to lead to your first freeze and frosts, all the way pretty much down to the coastline. So very unprecedented for this time of the year. A very early frost and freeze for these areas. And yeah, there will be areas that see heavy snow. There are winter storm warnings issued for, say, areas across the UP. Let's click on a location here in the middle of these warnings. Again, just pretty much a random location. Let's wait for this to load. Again, this may be one of the heaviest lake effect events of the season for these areas because of just how perfect the setup is, despite it being so early. You know, look at that. Tonight, 5 to 8. You're right. Tomorrow, 7 to 11. Monday night, 4 to 7. So these are massive amounts. Again, easily over 2 feet of snow could occur across some of these areas across the UP. Now, let's take a look at the European model. Again, this is the model that I've been using to track this system. I do believe it has the best handle on it, and I continue to think that. So let's start off by showing you the European model. Again, at this point, the storm isn't far out, so the differences between the models are relatively small. But as I was saying, we have a high pressure that's moving in from the west. It's trying, you know, push the cold air towards the south and east. It's initially is heading at a very eastward direction. It's quick moving, but this low pressure starts developing here across southern Canada here, really southern, kind of almost over Lake Huron, so northern U.S., southern Canada. And what this does is, again, you can see these millibars, which the closer they are together, that means that the stronger the wind is, and they really start compacting as the low pressure starts spinning counterclockwise, as low pressures do across the northern hemisphere. So its wind field is blowing the winds in this direction, and this high pressure over here, you can see marked by that blue, is also a very strong high pressure, much stronger than the low pressure is for being a low pressure, and its winds are spinning clockwise. So it's doing something like this, and that's why it's creating kind of like a double thrust of very strong winds. Normally, there still would be decent winds with the high pressure, but with these two combined over warm waters, this is just going to create some very effective lake effect snow, especially across areas where it's colder, like the UP. Now, let me track this forward through you. Notice that this is tomorrow in the morning, so a lot more chaotic already as compared to today. So in less than 12 hours, this map will be lit up with snow and showers. This map meaning the radar. It's already decently lit up, but there's a lot more coming. And notice that by tomorrow midday, this low pressure is again still kind of strengthening. It's wobbling around. Heavy lake effect is occurring across the UP. The inland, the mainland portion of Michigan is mainly receiving rain and grapple. And do note that we have this extremely cold air because of the strong wind. This cold air penetrates much further into the southern United States than it normally would. Normally, if there wasn't a low pressure that formed, this high pressure would probably just drift through southeastern Canada and maybe clip the northeast with some pretty chilly air and portions of the northern Great Lakes, but it would not go as far south as is forecast to. And notice there's some pretty heavy snow that breaks out across Ontario. So again, that's going to lead to some widespread more accumulations as opposed to the lake effect, which is a bit more hit or miss in certain locations. Notice as we push this into late Monday, you may think into early Tuesday this system may be wrapping up. Not quite. It's still spinning. Very strong winds, right? More snow across these areas. The cold air continues to plunge further south, and now we start developing a pretty nasty cold front. So Monday, the Northeast, you're most likely fine. You'll just probably be seeing some pretty warm temperatures out ahead of this. But behind, once the system moves close enough and the cold front starts developing, Tuesday morning, you'll start seeing some rain, especially across New England. Right, New York City, New Jersey, you might get spared from the rain, and you might want some rain there because it is dry. But across Maine, I do know they just received quite a bit of heavy rain, and that's why they have flash flood watches or flood watches up there. You could see this cold front will yet again bring quite a bit of rainfall for those areas, and it's going to be also pretty slow moving. By the time it clears out, it could easily drop 1 to 3 inches of rainfall. And notice that the system continues to spin around. It gets cut off from the actual flow of the jet stream, so it's a lot slower moving. Eventually, it does move out of here and gives way to a completely different pattern, but not before, dropping quite a bit of snow and lowering the temperature across the United States by 10 to 25, even 30 degrees below average, pretty much breaking records across many areas. So a record-breaking event in that sense. Let's go back now and show you some of these snowfall amounts with the with the European model. So again, at this point, I would say that a lot of the models do overshow the lake effect, especially across areas where there could be kind of a challenge in terms of predicting the rain-snow mixing, right? So there are some models that show very heavy snow across northern Indiana. That most likely won't be the case, but you could see that the European does clearly show that some of these, especially if they were to occur later in the evening or at night, could result in some snow that could bring 3 to 4, maybe even 5 inches of snow across some of these areas, Ohio, Michigan. The 5 seems rather extensive, and I wouldn't, that would be kind of like the high-end probability if this system overperformed. Normally, though, I would say probably anywhere from a dusting to 2 inches is probable across some of these areas, Lake Erie, Lake Michigan, and these lake effect belts. Further up north here, it's not going to have a problem accumulating even over 2 feet across the UP and even into northern Wisconsin, closer to a foot. And across Ontario, do notice we do have some very significant amounts of snow as well. 20 inches is not out of the question there. In terms of total rainfall, so, for the Northeast especially, as that's where a lot of this rain will be occurring at its kind of heaviest. Though again, do note that a lot of these areas could still pick up decent rain from this lake effect. As again, it's just a perfect setup. But do note, areas like Maine could pick up again anywhere from 1 to 3 inches. Further eastward, a bit less. Not really much of a concern. And into a lot of southern Canada, these big cities also picking up a decent share of rainfall. So that's from the European model. Now I want to go back and show you the European model, but on a different website, where I could show you kind of help you visualize how cold this air actually is. So that was just the surface map that I was showing you, kind of a simulation of the radar, right, and with a little bit of kind of some wind graphics. But they could be hard to read, especially on like a screen that may not, on a phone screen or whatnot, wherever you're watching this. Especially also if you don't really, monitor these weather maps, you're not as familiar with them. This will help you though. So this is a weather and temperature anomaly. Basically, wherever it's colder than average based on historical climatology, it shows blue colors. Obviously the deeper the color, the colder it's forecasted to be, and the same thing with this warmth. And I do want to note it's going to be very warm across the north and western United States and into southwestern Canada. So not everyone will be in on this cool weather, but do note that even as early as tonight, we're already seeing a decent plume of cool air, right? But though, again, the anomalies aren't really too significant, anywhere from 8 to 10 degrees. Normally, we would see at least a few of these during, any regular fall. But what makes this extraordinary is that this magnitude of cold air maintains its quality in terms of the sense that, I guess if an air mass of 40 degrees moves over here, it's not going to be, 40 degrees across Minnesota during this time of the year isn't as crazy as 40 degrees across Alabama. And the thing is that with these very strong winds quickly plunging this air south, there could be, that scenario where we have 40 degrees, 40 degrees, 40 degrees, and that's why you'll see these colors light up as more and more pink and purple colors, because the further south you go with 40 degrees, it becomes more of an anomaly, right? So notice that by Tuesday in the morning, we have many areas, again, already experiencing frost, freezes across the central south, but it kind of maximizes and fully reaches the deep south by Tuesday and into Wednesday. And you can see, this includes Florida, Texas, again, pretty far westward because of this cold air that's just being pumped in by the stubborn low pressure. Out ahead of it, quite a bit of warm air, and do note that behind it, also quite a bit of warm air across the northwest and southwestern Canada. And eventually this cold air does move out. It will still be pretty stubborn, at least through this weekend, especially across the southeast. But then we give way into a much warmer pattern, which actually could be conducive towards some very nasty and large storms. So we'll have to keep an eye on for that. But that's, for a different time once we do see once we're closer in time there and once the system passes. GFS model, we're again a little bit more aggressive with some of these temperature anomalies. Easily showing records being broken if anomalies were to occur at this, at this degree. Again, you can see, the vast majority of the United States and the population is under this cold air, or you could call it cold air. And you can see that again, these anomalies are especially lit up further south. I'll show you the temperature readings in just a second. I'm just trying to show you, visualize where on this map, if you are, you can find your state location and see how long this cool air will last. Do note that by Friday, Saturday, or late Friday into Saturday, most of that chill is gone, and the magnitude is pretty much negligible. It's just a little bit, chillier than normal. So let's go back now and show you the 2-meter temperature shaded. So this is just actual thermometer reading, not just the anomaly. So it gives you a good look. So again, you're on this map, find your location, kind of see what you may be, where you live, find your little degree numbers. So notice if you live across southern Indiana, this number kind of corresponds to that average. It's not perfect, but it definitely is kind of the best thing I could show you. And here's the time graphic. So October 16th, 7 p.m. when I'm recording this video, still pretty warm across the south. You're right, no heat wave or anything, but definitely not incredible. Tomorrow, Florida, the peninsula of Florida and into Georgia, 83 there, 80s, definitely warm. Definitely not cool. Almost no signs of what's to come. All right, but notice across the Midwest, Great Lakes, a lot cooler air spilling throughout the day on Monday. This continues plunging deeper into the south. Anywhere you have this blue, that's where freezes will occur if this map is correct, if this model is correct, which to a major degree it will be. There obviously it won't be perfect, but anywhere you see the 34, 36, frost can still occur in those temperatures. It's just that it probably won't be again as destructive, and depending on the plant and whatnot is impacted, how resilient it is to cold air determines how impacted it will be by 34 or 35 degrees. But once it gets down to 22 degrees, most plants and most vegetation is crippled by that. Do note that by Tuesday morning we have again 40s, upper 40s all the way down to the Gulf Coast, but again that's not the coldest. During the day we obviously see a little bit of a rebound in terms of temperatures, not really anything too significant, especially across further north. We see 40s, 30s, and portions of northern Minnesota may just stay below freezing for the whole day, which again is rather unusual for October still. And do note that by Wednesday morning, we have many areas all the way down to the Gulf Coast, 35, 36, a lot of tropical plants and whatnot could be impacted by that negatively. I know squash plants that could grow as far north as, pretty much a Canadian border at 34 degrees can get fried. So, that definitely is something I want to give you guys a heads up on. A lot of people may just not be expecting this because normally these type of temperatures occur across the south maybe in 1 to 2 months, or at least in the past years. It's definitely an early one this year, so that's why I'm kind of concerned about this. Do note further north, obviously, Missouri, central Missouri, 24, 25. That's marking the end of the growing season. Definitely early. And then the temperatures start moderating. You can still see it's very chilly across these areas, way chillier than it should be. But the worst is over. And again, we do start seeing a quick temperature rebound as we start seeing strong winds, but from the other direction, pumping in a lot of warm air. So, it's pretty incredible, right? You have Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, all these states in the 70s by this upcoming Sunday and Saturday, going from this first part of the week not getting out of the 30s or 40s. Look at that. And during the day on Tuesday, it's going to be a miserable day for a lot of these areas, or even tomorrow. So quite a big turnaround. And again, the pattern is going to become potentially even more active. So, I showed you the temperatures, I showed you the anomalies, I showed you the actual storm system, I showed you kind of the general timing. I do want to show you a model that I like looking at. And actually, let's go take a look at the RAP model. This one is better, and it has a more up-to-date version of its kind of graphics compared to the one I wanted to show you. So this is a model that goes out only a few hours out. Maybe a bit more than few, but it doesn't go out far. The models I was showing you, the European and GFS, usually go out, in hundreds of hours, indicating, at least a week. This one literally just goes out maybe half a day or at most 2 days, depending on what time it comes out. Every 6 hours, it has a longer run of data. Notice this one will help us visualize kind of the setup for this even more. We have this high pressure, we have this low pressure. Again, this low pressure is pretty much developing as I speak. And again, this will really intensify this event. A lot of lake effect starts running along the, even the shores of Wisconsin into early tomorrow. This thing continues intensifying. And notice that there's going to be widespread kind of grapple, snow showers across Wisconsin, Michigan. I've been dropping this word grapple around a few times. You may be wondering what that is. Grapple is essentially kind of a form of snow. I guess it's a lot of people when they initially see it think it's hail or sleet. It's not either. It's just kind of this it's kind of like this melted snowflake that's not water. It's not sleet, because sleet is pretty much a completely melted snowflake that refroze into a drop of ice. This thing is just a slightly melted snowflake, because the thing is with these setups that the cold air aloft is very, very cold. So you could be experiencing 40 degrees on the ground, 39 degrees, 40, maybe like, oh, it's way too warm for snow. But the thing is that the snow is falling, and only in the last few hundred feet of the air column, it starts getting melted a bit by these warmer temperatures. And that's what causes the snowflake to be kind of disformed, and that's what we call grapple. Now, that is one of those things that could be tomorrow. You could be, even some of these areas probably right here, we could be looking, especially under the more intense showers, where something like this may look like if it's a rain shower. But tomorrow, under the extremely cold air aloft, this could actually be bringing a frozen precip. So that's kind of another thing I'm a bit worried about. Some people may look at the radar, think it's just rain, and then they're out driving and whatnot, and their visibilities under these things can get significantly reduced. And I'll tell you another thing I'm concerned about. So as this system starts trending a bit towards the east, and you can see the wind flow goes a bit more northerly off of Lake Michigan and potentially Lake Huron, we do see these longer bands of snow potentially develop. And right by the lake, there will be too strong of an impact from the lake waters, warm lake waters, and it will fall as rain. But further away inland, where it could be a bit colder, some of this could transition into snow. Now, these will be pretty heavy in terms of the precipitation rate. There could even be some localized thunder. So if this ends up converting to snow, obviously it will have a hard time accumulating because it's warmer than 32 degrees on the surface, and the ground is warm. The thing is that they're going to be falling at very heavy rates. Visibility is going to be reduced, and it won't take much for travel issues to kind of arise. And I'm afraid there could be maybe even some pileups and whatnot, as we sometimes see in these lake effect belts. The visibility is just incredibly reduced, and the forecast may call just for an inch of snow, right? But that's all it takes if that inch of snow falls within 30 minutes. And if this does get prolonged over a certain area and the forecast is a bit colder than expected, I wouldn't be too surprised to see even a few inches across some of these areas, 1 to 2 inches. The National Weather Service is just calling for some wet slushy accumulations, and I do believe that anywhere the snow would fall would be and would fall and accumulate would be grass, but on the roads it would still create a slushy mess. You know, despite how warm the ground may be, it's going to be falling at some pretty incredible rates. And notice this system kind of retracts, right? It rebounds, so it brings kind of a more reinforcing shot of cold air. More of this lake effect continues, especially across the UP. I mean, these areas are just going to get hammered throughout the whole event. These areas, you know, further south a bit less, as it's going to be kind of broken apart. You can see as the system moves into late Tuesday, early Tuesday, the winds kind of shift, and we see more of a not as good of a lake effect setup. But we start seeing this cold front really get its game together and start impacting the northeast with some pretty decently heavy rain. And again, that could be taking its sweet time as well. You can see the system pretty much collapses its whole self onto it. So these winds could be strong for quite a few days. But the high pressure does end up weakening, so then it kind of is allowed, this low pressure, for its winds to be not necessarily, you know, constrained, and its flow kind of gets more broad. So total accumulated precipitation according to this model, you could see obviously targeting the lakes with some very heavy amounts. You know, under some of these bands, there could be amounts that approach that. And you can see the northeast where that cold front is. This isn't the full event, but there will be, again, 1 to 2, even 3 inches of rain. And obviously the snowfall is pretty extensive, especially across the UP. Yeah, that's going to be impressive. That actually occurs 31 inches. I don't think there will be 31 inches. But at the same time, I wouldn't be shocked because the National Weather Service is calling for localized areas over 2 feet. So, yeah, there you go. And do note, you know, it shows, what does that show? 18 inches across Indiana. That's assuming that, you know, it would be snowing across these areas with no... with a 32-degree temperature or lower at the surface and with not warm ground. And honestly, I think some of the intensity of these bands in terms of the snow is a bit overdone. So, and if it is snowing, it'll probably be a grapple mix with kind of snow, so it won't be as efficient in accumulating. You know, 18 inches, it's not going to happen. But, 1 to 2 inches across some of these areas, especially across grassy surfaces, maybe even 3 to 4 is possible. I don't want to go too far, north in this range of snow that I'm giving here because, that's a thing. I'm just going to say this, that there's a potential that, if this does, I wouldn't be too surprised to tomorrow check the snowfall map, right, the kind of snowfall reports, and there's one area that got like close to 6 inches of snow from one little area. That wouldn't be shocking because of just the setup. But again, widespread amounts of 6 inches is very unlikely, so that take at it. But again, really the threats don't need to be aren't going to be limited to just when it starts accumulating to 6 inches. All it takes is, again, an inch, maybe an inch and a half, and you have some pretty bad travel conditions across these areas. So again, 18 inches, no. 6 inches, maybe. And anything, 1 to 2 inches, definitely a good possibility across these areas. Same thing with Lake Erie, though. In Pennsylvania, though I would say the chances are smaller because the fetch of wind isn't as healthy. And northern Michigan, some decent amounts of snow as well. All right, thank you guys so much for watching. That's it. It was a longer video again, but there's a lot of stuff to cover, and hopefully you enjoyed. See ya.